as often happens when Vajra introduces, I would, in just talking about me, he seems to give a sort of Dharma talk, wonderful Dharma talk. That says more about Vajra than it does about me. So it's a delight to listen to you. Yes, so we're going to look at this whole area of offering, surrendering the self, and Vajra talked about offering one's life, and in Tantric Buddhism, which you've been exploring a bit, offerings are very, very important. In fact, in Buddhist tradition generally, offerings are very, very important. It's a very, very big feature of Buddhist practice from the very beginning. These beautiful flowers, beautifully arranged flowers, are so lovely coming in here, so subtly done, and the candles, and there's an incense bowl there where incense could be offered. These are offerings. They're not there simply to adorn the room, but they do have a whole meaning. These are the three basic offerings in Buddhist tradition, in Buddhist practice. I'll say something a bit more about them perhaps a bit later on. Vajra mentioned my journey, or a bit about my background and discovering Buddhism when I was 17. I actually think I started to read about it when I was about 16, and then came across our Buddhist community, Triratna Buddhist community, when it wasn't called that, in Brighton, which was near where I lived, in somebody's house in Brighton, where an order member who became a very important friend to me, an order member named Buddhadasa, which means servant of the Buddha, interestingly enough. I went along to his class, and it was in a way a bit unusual in those days. When you come along to the London Buddhist Centre, most of our Buddhist centres, you have a beautiful, gradual approach to things. You're gently introduced to meditation and Buddhism and so on, and you gradually build up, and you're invited onto retreats and study groups, and there's that lovely, serene unfoldment. Well, my first evening was a full-length Metta-bhavana, 50 minutes, loving kindness meditation, and I insisted on sitting in full lotus, and I've had the back problems ever since, and then a sevenfold puja, which is a pretty hardcore Buddhist devotional practice. And thank goodness it was that, because that was what I wanted. And the first part of a puja, this sevenfold worship, is making offerings with mandarava, blue lotus, and jasmine, with all flowers, pleasing and fragrant. I pay honour to the princes of the sages, so worthy of veneration. And it goes on, and I didn't know I wanted that, but that's what I wanted. That was what I was really searching for. I was searching for something which involved that kind of practice. And by the end of the puja, I knew that I would dedicate my life to Buddhism. I don't know how I knew that. It wasn't a sort of road to Damascus experience or anything like that. There was just a quiet and joyful realization of what I wanted to do with my life. I wasn't, I would say, a spiritual person or anything like that. I was a pretty normal adolescent, football playing, original mixed up kid, really. But there was something else that was in play. So for me, this whole area of making offerings, and in a sense of adoring, which is what making offerings can be the expression of, adoring that which is beyond, is very, very important to me. Very, very important to me in my Buddhist life. I'm not saying it's the way for everybody, not at all. Everybody comes to the Dharma with their own particular temperaments and interests, and have to find their particular strengths and see their particular weaknesses and so on. But for me, this whole idea that Buddhist practice, be it meditation, be it study, be it ethical practice, is an offering is perfectly natural, is a perfectly natural way of me looking at things. Now, it might sound a little bit strange to some of you, this way of looking at Buddhism, and some people would even think that, perhaps think if they've read a little bit about Buddhism, that it's a bit sort of aberrant. I mean, some people, even say, well, the Buddha didn't encourage this sort of thing, and so, why have the followers fallen away? There can be presentations of the Buddha and the early disciples which sound, frankly, a bit Protestant. It's all very, very stripped down, and the interpretation is, no, you're just concerned with meditation and mental states and so on. And this whole idea of any kind of notion of devotion and adoration and offering and worship and that whole area of things is somehow foreign to it. Has not the Buddha been deified and so on? But it's of course not like that when you really investigate the scriptures and where you see much more into the Indian context. And I had the great good fortune of living in India for many, many years. And even though it's a different India from the time of the Buddha, there's still customs and practices which have been in India since time immemorial. One of the things that you notice again and again in the Buddhist texts is the Buddha is living his life. He's an enlightened being, and he's naturally living from wisdom and loving kindness for everybody, and the expression of that is to wander from place to place to communicate his realization. He has experienced complete liberation, the highest possible happiness, and he wants to share that. He wants to communicate that to those who will respond to it, who want to respond to it. It's very interesting in Buddhist texts that there are people that don't respond, and that's important. I'm glad there are records of that, because getting involved in Buddhist practice must be the act of an individual. As the Buddha himself said, the Buddhas only point the way. They don't save you. By you must the zealous effort be made. The Buddhas only point the way. This is very, very important, very, very important principle. Buddhists are not interested in that sense in conversion, as it were. We're not interested in numbers. We're interested in individuals from themselves, deeply from themselves, living a Buddhist life if they want to the extent that they want to. So the Buddha would communicate, and it does seem that he was a very, very effective communicator. The records are a bit, in some ways, a little bit stilted in the way they're presented, but nonetheless there shines through this personality, this extraordinary personality with incredible powers of empathy. He could talk to anybody. He could talk to homeless wanderers. He could talk to his monk and nun disciples. He could talk to housewives. He could talk to businessmen. He could talk to kings, queens, farmers, labourers, vagabonds, ne'er-do-wells. He could talk to and communicate with anybody. He had these extraordinary powers of empathy, and at the same time he's definitely communicating the nature of enlightenment very naturally. Sometimes, of course, he might give a wonderful extended clear discourse describing the stages of the path. Sometimes he'll just be having a conversation with someone. They don't even know his quality. They don't even know. There are even some of his monk disciples who've never met him. They don't actually know that he's the Buddha. They've been ordained by somebody else, and it emerges in the communication. Wow, I'm with the teacher, through that communication. Beautiful stories. And when people did get it, when they did break through, when they did see things, there's a tremendous shift in consciousness, a tremendous opening up. I mean, they often say, they sort of break almost into poetry. They say things like, it's as if they say the Dhamma, the teaching, the truth, has been made known in many ways by the Blessed One, by the Bhagawan. It's as if that which has been knocked over has now been set up straight. It's as if a light has been lit in the darkness so that those with eyes can now see. It's like someone has pointed a way through the wilderness. This is the sort of thing that they would say. And then they would express their commitment by saying, to the Buddha for refuge I go, to the Dhamma for refuge I go, to the Sangha for refuge I go. As long as my breath lasts, I will go for refuge. I will place my heart upon this. I will live this life. Very powerful language. And then very often what went with that was tremendous gratitude. Tremendous gratitude. Gratitude, this wonderful emotion of gratitude, this rare emotion of gratitude perhaps these days, where there's so much emphasis on lack, isn't there? So much emphasis on what we don't have, so much emphasis on our privation and what we need, the next thing we need. Gratitude is regarded in Buddhist tradition as a sort of wisdom, a knowing. The word for it in Pali is katanyata, in Sanskrit it's kritagnyana, which means knowing, having a full awareness of the benefits that you've received in life. It's a knowing of what you've been given, a knowing of who has helped you and how they've helped you. And with it, with that feeling of gratitude, I don't know if you've ever felt gratitude very intensely, it's a very, very peculiar emotion, because there's a sort of joy at the enrichment, but there's also a certain, how can one say, I'm going to use the word humility, but it's not a sort of self-conscious humility. It's that sort of natural sort of sense, I have all these riches, but they have been made available to me by others. And there's something in that. There's a kind of softening, an opening of egolessness even in gratitude. Very, very important, supremely important emotion, a real wisdom, a real knowing, not an elementary emotion, but something really, really fundamental. And these people, when they feel that the way has been completely open to them, they feel this gratitude, and they will spontaneously then give. You get all sorts of stories of them wanting to give, maybe a flower, maybe some cloth for a robe. There's one occasion where I think it's Vaishali, this courtesan, a remarkable disciple of the Buddha, who's very, very devoted to the Buddha, and the Buddha thought very highly of. She gave this very unusual, very elaborate piece of kind of diamond jewellery, all with filigrees of gold, as an offering, which so that it could be turned into property for the Buddha to use, him and his disciples, a retreat centre, effectively. You get Anathapindika wanting to give, well, he gives eventually the Jeta Grove and Anathapindika's Park and so on. This is the way people responded. There was this feeling, I have been so enriched by this. My life has been changed. I just want to give something, anything. I want to give something to you that you can use, that you can have. So this is offerings. It's very, very natural when you think about offerings like this. It's a very natural kind of communication, isn't it? We sometimes do it ourselves, don't we? And somebody we love very much, who's touched us very, very deeply. We want to give them something. We want to delight them because they've affected us very positively. Well, it's the same in the context of the enlightened one and his disciples. Okay, that's understandable in the days of the Buddha, I suppose, when the Buddha's around. But what about afterwards? How come sort of things developed there? Well, there's a very, very beautiful story after the Buddha's parinirvana, as it's called, his passing into final nirvana. Buddhas don't die like we do. Their physical body drops away and they enter, in a manner of non-entering, into parinirvana, which cannot be said to, where they cannot be said to exist, not exist, both or neither. So don't even bother speculating about where Buddhas go to. Just don't go there. We don't need to dwell too much on that. But obviously, the Buddha's parinirvana was sort of catastrophic for the Buddhist community. Not for the enlightened disciples, the arahants. They, of course, as far as Egg was concerned, in a sense, the Buddha hadn't gone. Enlightenment was still present. So at the parinirvana, they don't grieve. And sometimes people think, oh, they're really cold-hearted. Well, it's not that. I mean, enlightenment hasn't gone from them. It's there. In a sense, the Buddha is ever present. But for everybody else, for people like ourselves, very often when modern Buddhists read the old text, they identify for some reason with the enlightened ones. They don't identify with the people weeping and wailing and saying the light has gone out of the world. The light has gone out of the world, because for them, for those people like ourselves, there isn't going to be that contact, that direct contact anymore with that presence, with that person communicating enlightenment. You might be aware, some of you, that our own teacher, our own founder, Sangharakshita, died not that long ago, and he was a personal teacher of mine. He ordained me, and I first met him when I was 17. And although I felt his passing was fine, because he'd passed on so much that, well, in a way, we're just carrying on as we've done for years and years. He was a very responsible teacher in that way. He didn't just leave us, as it were. I felt the sadness I felt was, I can't just go and see him anymore. I can't just go and bow my head to my teacher, make him an offering, bring him incense. He had a great love of perfume, find a really lovely perfume for him and things like that. And I can't do that anymore. I can't have that darshan, as the Indian idiom has it, of just taking sight, being in the presence of one's teacher. And that's sad. That's sad for me. It's not the end of the world. I'm not going to get neurotic about it and grieve for the rest of my life. But there's that aspect of communication that isn't present. But after the parinirvana, his great disciple Ananda went from Kushinagra, where the Buddha entered parinirvana, to Shravasti, where the Buddha had spent so many years of his life in retreat near the great city of Shravasti. And after, in a way, giving solace to all the disciples there, giving them heart, Ananda giving them heart. Ananda was a wonderful disciple, wonderful teacher, wonderful friend, very, very compassionate figure in early Buddhism. Ananda went to where the Buddha used to stay. Buddha used to stay in a sort of hut, a kind of grass hut, wooden hut probably, called the Gandakuti, the perfumed chamber. The perfumed chamber. Apparently wherever the Buddha stayed, it was always called the perfumed chamber. And there's this sort of idea that the Buddha's, as it were, inner state was the perfumed chamber. Isn't that wonderful? Not he is dwelling in, high meditative consciousness. No, the perfumed chamber, far more expressive, I feel, of what the Buddha's state actually would be. But this place was called the perfume chamber, the Gandakuti. Ananda went in. He cleared up the flower garlands that had been offered, that had withered, cleared them away. He swept the floor. He laid out a mat. He filled up one of those earthenware water thingies, you know what I mean. And he sat there as if the Buddha was there. It's a very, very significant moment, I think, in in Buddhist history. Later commentators said, well, that's because he was attached to the Buddha. But I don't think it really is that. I think it's something else. I think behaving as though the Buddha was there, putting out water, putting out a mat, clearing the place, sitting as if the Buddha was present, was the very obvious way that Ananda and other disciples of the Buddha would recollect enlightenment itself. It's all too easy when you read in the West, when we talk about enlightenment and nirvana and higher states of consciousness, to have they become abstractions. They become abstractions. They can be even reduced to sort of psychological states of consciousness. But if you start to imagine enlightenment as a person, you're doing something quite extraordinary. I've made this point probably here before many times. Personhood actually is our highest category. Our highest category isn't mind or some refined concept or something like that. Our highest category is our personhood, because we are persons and we are extremely important to ourselves as persons. Well, I'm very important to myself, I can assure you, and I hope you're very important to yourselves. You know, it's very, very important that we really do regard ourselves as persons and other persons as persons. So if we start to imagine enlightenment as a person, we're endowing enlightenment with our highest category, and we're going to treat it with the appropriate reverence and respect, the appropriate honour that it deserves. And we're going to start opening to that enlightenment much more fully and much more completely. It's perfectly natural for Ananda to think of enlightenment, to have the sense of enlightenment by recollecting the Buddha. The very important Buddhist practice, which is still practiced to this day, called Buddhanusati, Buddhanusmriti. This is sati, it could be translated as mindfulness of the Buddha or recollection of the Buddha, but sati, which we often translate as mindfulness, just means memory. It means memory, remembering the Buddha. Remembering the Buddha. So that's perfectly natural for those disciples to remember the Buddha. That's how you remember enlightenment. And then the whole emergence of Buddha images, right down to this day, is all to do with that. That's why we have these these images, and they might not be the best of images. They can't perhaps no image can fully encapsulate and communicate the full personhood of enlightenment, but they give us a way of meditating and opening to enlightenment, to the wisdom of the Buddha, which is what we need in our Buddhist life. And we can practice the making of offerings as a way of communicating with that enlightenment, with enlightenment as a person. So I want to sort of indicate a little bit of a path of that. So I want to relate the making of offerings to the development of wisdom. If we talk about the making of offerings, if we talk about worship, we think, that must be a very long way from wisdom. Seeing things as they are, seeing the truth so that you may be liberated, from all of your bonds. But they're actually intimately related. The first level of wisdom, according to Buddhist tradition, is called Sutta Mai Prajna, the wisdom that comes through hearing, through listening. It's often translated and understood as the wisdom of learning. That's the way it's sort of put in the modern world. But it's the wisdom of hearing. It's the wisdom of hearing that it's very, very important. This, of course, originally Buddhism was an oral tradition, and a wise person was known as Bahushruta, one who's heard much from the sources of wisdom. The word Shruta is also very interesting in Sanskrit, because it immediately implies that for you, the person who is speaking has, for want of a better word, a kind of authority for you. Not that they're authoritarian, but because of your experience of that person, because of your your experience of them, and because of your confidence in them, their words have a weight. They have a weight for you, so you really pay attention. You find plenty of stories in the Buddhist texts where the Buddha is communicating. He's saying words to someone who's really listening, and they become enlightened on the spot. It is that powerful. They are so open and so ready, and the communication is so direct. It goes straight to the heart, straight to the deepest recesses of the mind, and there's a powerful transformation. And we're a bit shocked when we read the passage and think, you read it again and again and nothing's happening. And of course that's because, in a sense, the Buddha isn't there for you. And we don't have that receptivity. So we need to start, one of the things we need to start doing in relation to wisdom is start to develop a receptivity. This word receptivity is overdone, unfortunately. It's become one of those hackneyed words. You even get accused, you're not being receptive to me, and things like that, and can easily be associated with passivity. I want to sort of change the language, or try and fill out the notion of receptivity and hearing by talking about hospitality and welcome and courtesy. I want to talk about those emotions. One of the symbolisms of offerings, you have this set of offerings called the 7 or the 8 offerings to the honoured guest. You find for example, in Tibetan Buddhism, you'll have 7 or 8 bowls on a shrine with all sorts of different objects in them. Sometimes it's just bowls of water. These are the 7 or 8 offerings to the honoured guest. You're regarding the Buddha, you're regarding the Bodhisattvas, as they're called, as honoured guests in your life. And in Indian tradition, this is so strong. This is so strong. I mean, when I lived in India, I was working with Indian Buddhists, very, very poor people. But this experience of being welcomed, the experience of hospitality was so extraordinary. Or I'd go and give a talk somewhere, and immediately the first thing that happens is you're fully welcomed into the environment. And that might well involve the washing of feet, or being given water to wash with because you're hot and tired, water to drink. Perfume might be sprinkled, perfumed water. You're garlanded with flowers. Incense is burnt, lamps are lit, food is brought, and even there might be music played as well. These are the sort of offerings that are given, and it's a wonderful thing. I think it's a mark of a very, very high culture. No matter how, and some of the people that would be welcoming me in India were illiterate. They were very uneducated. They were far more cultured than myself. I felt like a clod, compared with this wonderful quality of welcome, this sensitivity to the guest, the sensitivity as you come into their environment. This adab, as this beautiful word that you have in Arabic, and I think it's in Persian and certainly in Urdu, adab, which means courtesy, duty, very, very important, well, not just emotion, but a whole sort of style, attitude, set of gestures in relation to the guest. So it's very important, I think, that if we want wisdom, if we want to know, if we want to really take in the teaching, we have to welcome. We have to welcome the Buddha and the teaching into us. We have to put aside all our distractions. We have to make a space. We have to make a space of attention to really give our full attention to the Buddha and the teaching. The iPhones, the iPads, all those bits and pieces have to be put aside if we're actually going to allow all this into us. There can be a habit, I think, in these days of meditation being squeezed into our day. Well, that's better than nothing, in our meditation apps and, all these sorts of things. We're not going to get very far with that. We have to actually create a space, a lit space, in where we can have a sort of meeting, where we can really open to what's coming in. It's very interesting, the word for honoured guest in Indian languages, even in modern Indian languages, Atiti. Titi means time of day. Means no particular time of day. Because the really honoured guest, the very, very special guest, is the one that just turns up out of the blue. And, it's probably changing a lot in India these days with its westernization, industrialization and so on. But I can remember Buddhist friends of mine saying, "I'm sorry I didn't come yesterday, we had an RTT." And that meant putting everything aside for the guest. Somebody's turned up, and I don't know if it's to do with sort of Indian mythology that the guest, and even the sort of stranger guest, is like a divinity. You never know. You never know. I mean, it is apparently in Western monasticism that the honoured guest that would turn up at the monastery would needed to be treated like Christ himself, because you never know. You never know. And the symbolism here is that, you never know when the Buddha's going to enter your life. You need to be ready. You never know when the truth is going to come in. You never know when the Dharma is going to come in. So you need to be ready. You need to make that space. You need to you need to be ready for the space to open. You need those courtesies to develop. I think also generally in human life, it's important that we develop much greater courtesy and welcome and hospitality with one another. I think this is very, very important, giving people time, really paying attention when you meet someone, welcoming them into you, as hopefully they will welcome you into them. I think it's very, very difficult in busy London and so on. But I think it also comes to other areas of life. Just before I came down, I remembered a passage from a wonderful book called Real Presences by a great cultural critic named George Steiner. And he's talking about the whole way you approach a work of art should be with courtesy. It shouldn't be starting from a sort of postmodern, post-structuralist critique with that kind of cynical edge. You look with a heart, a common sense heart, with real courtesy, and you welcome in the work into you, and let it touch you. You savour it. You savour that. Then perhaps you can really begin to have some sort of engagement with the piece. So we need to be doing this generally in our life, so that when the Buddha comes in, when the Dhamma comes in, the truth comes in, we can really receive it. Every morning at home, in the summer time, it's a bit more difficult in the winter, but in the summertime, I go out into our garden. I live in the countryside in Norfolk, and for many years now, our gardener has been growing those lovely little French marigolds. You know, those beautiful, really orange little marigolds. And these are, I remember these from India, these are the sort of flowers of choice in terms of offering. And you can pick the heads and they'll keep growing more and more. And every morning in the summer months, I will go out very early, before anybody's up usually, and I'll gather just a few of these and a few rose petals from which have fallen or something like that. And the first thing I do before I meditate is to offer these flowers to my shrine in my room, and I'll light candles and incense. And this is a very, very important ritual for me. It means that I'm softening. It means that my meditation practice is much more receptive to what might be arising. It sets me for the day. I want to welcome in what I'm meditating on, what I'm going towards. I also just simply want to adorn. When you love someone, you want to adorn them, don't you? When you love anybody, you want to adorn them. They delight you so much, you want to please them. Well, it's the same with enlightenment, with Buddhist practice. That which you love, you adorn, and then you can be more open. Then you can flow more in meditation. You can start really listening to the truth. So that's a little bit on how wisdom might start arising through making offerings and through really hearing, really listening. But what about the next stage of wisdom, which is called the wisdom, it's Chintamaya Prajna in Sanskrit. Sometimes this is translated as reflection. Chinta is a much more powerful word than reflection. It's the wisdom that comes through a very strong wish. Chinta can mean wish, it can mean will. It means your whole heart and mind, not just your head, but your whole being is intently engaging with the truth that you've heard. Your whole being is focused on that. And the wish is to turn that into a living experience. That's the deep wish. So you're engaging your heart and mind, your whole being, the whole person, wholly attending with the truths that you've heard. Everything is being brought to that. So how does this relate to offerings? How does it relate to offerings? Well, of course, it also continues this theme of adorning, of loving. You want to make the offerings because your whole being is focused on the journey to truth. But you also get developing what we might call the ritualization of wisdom, the ritualization of wisdom, even the ritualization of moral attitudes, even the ritualization of metaphysics, as one writer has called it. So with these offerings you have here, there are traditional ways of reflecting when you make the offerings. Yes, they're very beautiful, the flowers. You offer them up to adorn the Buddha, to open to the Buddha, but then you reflect. These flowers, so beautiful and so sweet smelling, very soon they'll fade. Very soon they'll fade. Very soon they'll even start to smell. I mean, there's nothing worse than going in a badly tended shrine room. I'm sorry to say that some of our Buddhist brethren, you don't get it at the LBC, but I've even noticed it Padmavajra recently. I had to tick off a few people, even tick off myself, for noticing wilted flowers on the shrine, getting a bit stinky. Okay, it's teaching you impermanence, that's the reflection, but it's a little bit insulting and embarrassing. But that's the reflection. These flowers, they will start to fade. Even these ones are fading a bit, aren't they? That's quite good. Oh, I've broken one. But there you are, you've just seen it. You reflect with the offering. These will fade. I too will pass. I too will fade. This body, this consciousness, this person, I will transform, I will pass away. Our bodies too, like flowers, will pass away. So you reflect as you offer, as you make this offering, this very pleasing offering it up to the Buddha. You reflect on the impermanence of all things. You adorn your offering with reflection on the Buddha's teaching. And with the candle, you reflect that they're beautiful things, candles, aren't they? The sort of, especially when the lights are down, the glow that they make, the way they light up the gloom. You reflect that, the light has been lit from, because you often will have candles already lit, and if you were making your own light offering, the light has been lit from the Buddha's light. In the same way, may I light the lamp of wisdom in my heart, inspired by the Buddha. You make an aspiration to do that. So it's not just offering a candle, you're also reflecting on the need to develop the light of wisdom in your own heart, in your own life. You need to light it up with what you learn from the Dharma. And then incense, creating a lovely, sweet and pleasant atmosphere, you reflect on the fragrance of the perfect life, the fragrance of the good life, the fragrance of your own efforts, the fragrance of your own deeds, your own skillful deeds expressed, which is even stronger than that sweet smell. The Buddha says that the fragrance of virtue goes against the wind. All the other fragrances like sandalwood and aromatic resin and jasmine, this is from the flowers section of the Dhammapada, all those fragrances, wonderful though they are, the wind blows them this way and that way. But the fragrance of virtue, the fragrance of the higher life, that goes against the wind. And you can take that wind being the wind perhaps of our own karma, the sort of momentum, if you like, of our life. Well, we can set up a different life, the fragrance of our own deeds, and that can even start pervading the world around us. So we can reflect like that as we offer incense. So we're beginning to bring that Chintamaya Prajna, that wisdom that comes through, well, sort of really contemplating the Dharma, into the ritual act. And that makes it more powerful. It doesn't just stay as a set of ideas rattling around in your head. It's embodied. It's actually there, in relationship to these objects. And the more you do that in relation to these objects, you start to do them in relation to all experience. Your whole life becomes adorned with reflecting on Buddhist realization, so that sometimes you might see a leaf fall suddenly, or a petal fall in the park, or something like that, and immediately there's a sense of the impermanence of things. Directly, you sort of know it in that moment. There's another way in which you can reflect when you make offerings. I mentioned the 7 or 8 offerings to the honoured guest, and I said that in Tibetan Buddhism they often will just have 7 or 8 bowls of water to symbolise this. And here there's a whole meditation that you can do of the offering of the water bowls meditation. And I was taught this practice by my teacher, by Sangharakshita, when I was 17. I told you that I was very enthusiastic about making offerings and things like that. So I became the shrine keeper in the first Brighton Centre, and I really loved keeping the shrine. I turned it into a whole practice. I loved arranging the flowers and cleaning it, and I loved filling these beautiful bowls. We had these Tibetan bowls with water. And I was talking about it with Sangharakshita one day, well, the first time I met him when he came to visit. And he just immediately, just in the spur of the moment, just gave me this fantastic little teaching, which I'll tell you. This is the sort of ritualization of moral attitudes, of visionary imagination, and of metaphysics, of profound insight. So you have your special jug of water, and you go from left to right, imagining you're serving the Buddha. And as you pour each bowl of water, you chant a mantra, a very short mantra, words of power, magic words. You chant the mantra, Om, Ah, Hum, Om, Ah, Hum. And the Om is said to purify the water. You imagine as you chant Om that the water is completely purified. It's purified. You're also purifying yourself of all of your unskillful mental states. You're purifying yourself of all your dodgy motivations. You're purifying yourself of all those things. You're making a pure aspiration in making that offering. When you chant Ah, you imagine that the bowl is no longer just a brass bowl or a clay bowl with water in it. It's a magnificent bowl. It's a golden bowl. It's studded with jewels. It's a perfumed bowl. It's filled with flowers, and it's a vast bowl. It's filled with the most gorgeous foods. It's filled with the most fabulous things. It's an archetypal bowl, a mythic bowl. Your imagination knows no bounds because you have to offer the most extraordinary things to the Buddha. The enlightenment is vast. It's beyond any comprehension. So only the bowl, which is the size of the whole universe and filled with the most fabulous things, will be good enough, and then it probably wouldn't be good enough. That's what you imagine. And then when you say hum, you realize actually the bowl is empty. A bowl is just a word. There's no essential bowlness. The bowl is constructed, it's conditioned, it's empty, it's profoundly mysterious, it's inconceivable. It's an inconceivable bowl to an inconceivable Buddha. There's an inconceivable you offering. In fact, there is no offerer. There is no offering. There's no one offered to, and yet everything is perfectly offered. So this is the sort of thing that you do while you're just pouring the water. But again, you can see this is a wonderful meditation, a wonderful reflection. And, you start doing that every day. By the time you sit down to meditate, you're off. I mean, you're really going out there, going somewhere else. And again, it's starting to, wisdom is dawning. Wisdom is really dawning as you do these reflections. I better start winding up by talking about the next level of wisdom and the next level of offering. The next level of wisdom is Bhavanamaya Prajna, which is often translated as the wisdom that comes through meditation, but it's not really that. It's the wisdom that is a living experience. It's the wisdom that is lived. You've heard. You've taken it in. You've deeply meditated on the Buddha's teaching. Then it must start turning into the way things are, the way you are, the way life is. And the way that it does this with offerings is love. Is love. It's not sentimental love, not romantic love, but great love. The great love. The love which is just sheer surrender. Your whole life then really does become an offering. This is expressed in an extraordinary fashion by a great 8th century Buddhist master who was also a tantric figure, some believe, named Shantideva and our puja comes from his text, the Bodhicharyavatara. He does the most gorgeous offerings in his text, in the most wonderful Sanskrit poetry. His imagination knows no bounds. But then he says, and I offer myself to the conquerors completely. In devotion, I become your servant. He just offers himself completely. In devotion, I become your servant. The word for devotion is a translation of the Sanskrit word bhakti, which is often associated with Hindu schools, but it's there in Buddhism, where it has a bit of a different meaning. The word bhakti literally means to have a share in. It's from a root, to have a share in. It's the same root as one of the names of the Buddha, which is Bhagawan, which means to have a share in, has the same root. So your devotion, your adoration, your selfless service is really you fully opening up to the reality of the Buddha himself, the reality of wisdom and compassion. From now on, you're just going to live the life of wisdom and compassion. This is what's called the Bodhisattva's life. The Bodhisattva is someone who has decisively realized there is only one kind of path to enlightenment. There is only one enlightenment. That enlightenment is for others. It's not just for self. It's for others. Enlightenment for self is nonsense. It's complete fiction. It's not possible. That way of thinking is absurd. Enlightenment is the complete surrendering of self and other. Shantideva says in the Bodhicharya Avatar a bit later on, Nirvana is the giving up of all. It's the abandoning of all. It's the abandoning of everything. And my heart yearns for Nirvana. And if I am to give up everything, then let me give it to beings. Let me give everything to others. Let me give my body to them, to do with as they wish. Let them do what they like, whatever brings them pleasure, but let them suffer no misfortune because of me. Let them hate me, let them love me, or whatever they're feeling for me may bring about all that they desire. Let them wrong me, let them mock me, let them accuse me falsely, but let them share in enlightenment. This is the spirit of things. It's not martyrdom, which is a total ego trip. It's not that, don't worry, you're not asked to do that. It's this expression of radical selflessness. Because for bodhisattvas, according to another great Buddhist text, the Vimalakirti Nidesha, which I mentioned in a talk yesterday at Padmavajra, for bodhisattvas, the world consists only of living beings. The world is only living beings. The world is only persons. Sometimes it sounds like a very strange thing to say, doesn't it? The world is only living beings. The world is only persons. So often I live, where other people are sort of blobs, things on the periphery of my consciousness. People I gratify myself with. People to desire and be attached to and use, and when it goes wrong, hate them when they don't give me what I want. Not for a bodhisattva. For bodhisattvas, the world is only made up of living beings. It's only made up of persons living, thrilling, vibrating presences, real presences, like he or she is a real presence. So there can only then be one life. There can only be one life, benefiting all beings with the Dharma. So the offering, the selfless offering to the Buddha is the same as the selfless offering to all life, and living a life of total dedication to bring to others what they really need, which is the Dharma. I really believe that. It's the Dharma that people really need. I listen to a lot of life stories at Padmaloka, and it's quite clear from some of those life stories, from what people say, that if people had not found the Dharma, if they'd not found the Buddhist life, they would no longer be alive. That's no exaggeration. No, they'd no longer be alive, and they wouldn't have a meaningful life, the life of life. Some people think that sort of Buddhism and the Dharma that we do in places like this is a sort of luxury item, a kind of add-on that kind of makes you feel better with your ordinary life. No. This is life or death. Life and death. This is the life of life. And we haven't started yet. And we live a life of offering so that everybody can really benefit from this life. This whole Buddhist centre is an offering. There's not some Triratna International that funds our Buddhist centres that made these places. This place was built with, blood, sweat and tears, I know, because I was here. And a lot of anxiety and tension and determination and inspiration. And for it to go on, it needs that quality of offering. And so that we've got environments in which we can live this life, where we can share this life and start to experience that, like the Bodhisattvas, the world consists only of living beings. And in this Vimalakirti Nidesha, he says very strongly that he's sick. He's manufactured sickness in order to teach people the Dharma. And he says, my sickness will last as long as the sickness of all beings. That's the only time it will come to an end. I'm that tied to living beings. So, I think I better stop there. I hope that's been helpful. I hope you've understood that the making of offerings, the worship of the Buddha, the courtesies, the welcome of the Buddha into our lives, the welcome of it, to one another into each other's lives, is not, some degenerate Buddhist practice for the weak brethren, but it's a wisdom practice that leads to the transcendence of nirvana itself. There we are.